welcome to the Elements of Whisky podcast, where we talk about whiskeys, we try them, we sample them, and we talk about the stories that inspired the whiskeys.
Exactly.
And today,
my name is Lucia.
And my name is Max. Yeah.
Way ahead of you.
You're way ahead of me. Yeah, normally we have a very strong choreographed intro because normally we do it in Dutch, but this episode is in English. And that is because we had... the whole intro is just completely different than normal. Yeah, out of the window. Yep. What do we do normally? Normally we have a weekly whiskey podcast where we sample a whiskey, we'll talk about it, and just have a great time. But there was something very awesome going on because there was a whiskey festival in IJmuiden, a place in the Netherlands. And it's called Whisky and Rum at Sea.
And you had the amazing opportunity to go there and have an interview with our very special guest for the day.
Yes, we were talking about no one less than Graham Coull, current master distiller at Dingle Distillery.
Yes.
And we thought, okay, the whole interview is in English, so why not just make a small special episode completely in English for our English-speaking audience at home?
Max, which whiskey are we sampling?
Yes, that's a funny story, because during the interview we are trying 3 different whiskeys. The first one we're trying was the Dingle single malt, the first whiskey in the core range. Then we sampled the batch number 6, the latest release within the whole batch series, 100% matured on port casks. Very, very special whiskey that we had, and the one that Lucia has in her glass currently. And the last one that I sadly don't have here at the moment, but we have a very great placeholder. But we were drinking the festival bottling, and what they did is they bottled exactly the same recipe as the core range single malt.
This one, right?
So it was 61% PX sherry cask and 39% bourbon casks. And this blended into, I believe, bottled at 46.3% ABV.
This one.
Yes. So we had 3 very great whiskeys to try during this whole interview.
Again, you're saying we, but... You mean you.
Yeah, sorry. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we go straight back to Whiskey and Rum at Sea just a few hours before all doors opened and all the people came in and enjoying the whiskeys. And we sat down with no one less than Graham Coull. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy. But I'm sitting here with Graham. How are you? Thanks for being here, first of all.
I'm very good, yes, enjoying my time in the Netherlands.
Yes. First time visiting, or?
Second time, but the first time was only briefly. We were in Amsterdam for a weekend, a wet weekend in February it was.
Yes.
So we saw quite a lot of the pubs and restaurants, but not
mostly
so
the inside.
Mostly inside. It was very wet, I remember.
But you're currently living in Ireland? Of course, near Dingle, I imagine.
Yes, living in Dingle.
Okay.
Made the move across. Dingle is from Scotland, if nobody's picked up the accent. It's not an Irish one, but it's definitely Scottish. So we moved across almost 2 years ago now to Dingle, which is on the far west coast of Ireland. Almost as far as you can go.
And before we talk about Dingle, I'm really excited. You have been working in the whiskey industry for 25 years, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, before 25 plus 2 now. So So 25 in Scotch whiskey, and then 2 years in Irish. So.
And where have you been working before? At what distilleries and as what role did you have?
Yeah, well, I started way back, 1994, and my first job was with William Grant and Sons in Dufftown, who they family-own Glenfiddich, Balvenie and Kinninvie distillery. So I started there, actually on the bottling side of things. I was bottling Glenfiddich because they did everything in-house at that time. And then, I did my time there, and then I got the opportunity to move into the distillation side. And over a few years, I took over Glenfiddich, Balvenie and Kinninvie, which is the third distillery on the site. So it was great experience, great learning from it.
And that wasn't the only Scottish distilleries you worked at? You made a move?
I made a move from there. Yeah, I move every 11 years or so, or 14 years. That's my cycle, or it seems like that. So in 2005, moved slightly further north in Speyside to Glen Murray Distillery in Elgin, and took on the role as dual role as distillery manager and master distiller.
Okay.
for Glenmurray.
And now we start this new cycle of 11 years at Dingle.
Yeah, hopefully I've got 11 years left in me. Maybe a few more after that. But it's nice to spend a decent amount of time at a distillery because you get the chance to see what you've done come through and be released. So it's nice to work with other people's work. You inherit the work of the predecessor, and then hopefully you
add something to it.
Make your own mark, and you make your own decisions, and hopefully you hand it over or hand it on in good fettle for the next.
And this year there's been the first whiskey from Dingle in the core range. Is this something that was your idea, or was this something that is from your predecessor?
No, I think it was a natural progression for Dingle. We always knew that we would release a core expression or a regular expression. It was just a matter of the timing, and there's lots of factors that come into it. You have to have the stock profile available on the back burner to release, because previously we released batch releases, which are in some ways a bit simpler because it's a one-off batch and you don't have to repeat it. So you can use stock that you have, and then you don't have to find the same stock again.
Yes.
So
is it easier to do these batches than doing a core?
From a whiskey release point of view, well, from a production and construction point of view, it's maybe easier. You don't have to have that long-term planning. But on the other hand, it's fairly work-intensive to keep changing batches all the time, and down the chain, you're working with your suppliers and your customers. To chop and change all the time creates a lot of work downstream of the distillery. So it's nice to have, but it's also nice for Dingle to make its mark and put a whiskey out there that is there for the future. I think we use the phrase "here to stay," so it's here to stay. It will evolve, but certainly I would say maybe 3-4 years of this core expression, and then we'll maybe
tweak a little bit,
some tweaks or twists to it.
I'm really excited. You saying like it's here to stay, so let's try it. At least that's what I.
Luckily enough, I have one to hand. So this is the Dingle single malt, as we call it. So it's very simple. It has no other name apart from that. And we changed the packaging. We'll maybe see later the batch releases that we've done up till now. But this was quite a change to us. A big bold blue label and something to stand out. And it's got the Wren man on the front, our symbol. So he's.
And what does the symbol stand for?
Well, he's got a checkered history. In the past, a kind of spiritual festival, they would go and chase the bird, the wren, and catch the wren because they thought it was associated with evil spirits.
Okay.
So they would dress up, and it's kind of evolved. And Dingle Town is one of the few places that still celebrate it on the 26th of December. They dress up and then go round the town, and it's another Irish excuse for
celebration.
Party,
yeah.
which they're very good at. So. But it's a lovely symbol of Dingle, and it does help the bottle stand out. So
let's try it.
Yes, I'll let you have a little hold of that, and
we'll have a glass of the Dingle single malt. First thing that really is just interesting to me is like it's 46.3% volume, alcohol by volume. Why the 0.3?
I'd probably like to sit here and say, it's the absolute sweet spot for the taste. But no, I'll have to be honest and say it was just to make a little bit of differentiation from our batch releases, which are 46.5. The reason for it being around that strength is that it's non-chill filtered. So obviously the whiskey's coming out of the cask at cask strength, and we're adding our own water to that. But we don't go down too far, because if you reduce the strength too far, you have to go through chill filtration, which can strip out some of the character of the whiskey. So we're trying to keep as much of the flavour in there, because Dingle, we pride ourselves on using only first fill casks.
Okay.
So although we're a relatively young distillery, we're coming up for 9 years old in December, the whiskies are they pack a punch for their age, and it's mainly because the first fills, the first fill sherries, bourbons. So first use sherries and bourbons, we're using them for the first time.
I'm used to holding a glass of whiskey in my hands and just enjoying a glass, but this is a very great opportunity to talk with a master distiller. Like, how could I appreciate a Dingle the same way as you could, or you appreciate it? Or could you talk me through how you sit down and how you enjoy a glass?
Yeah, I'm not one for telling people what to do with their whiskey, because I think it's a personal thing, personal experience, and we all drink whiskey at different times and different experiences, different situations. So it very much, it's really do what you want to do. The whiskey's there. Hopefully, it's been prepared in as good a way as we can. This is a mid-strength whiskey at 46. So some people will drink it neat, will not need to reach for water. but others will want to add something to it. And again,
There's no right or wrong way.
no qualms about somebody putting even a lump of ice in it. If that's how you want to do it, then it's fine. But with any whiskey, I think the first thing, obviously, your nose will tell you quite an awful lot. So do take a little time to have a sniff of the whiskey, and also pour it and let it sit for a little while, because it kind of needs time to breathe and just acclimatise if the bottle's been in a cold environment or well, hopefully not a warm environment, but generally you'll store your whiskey in a cool place. So let it just warm up to room temperature, and then you'll get the volatiles. The real volatiles will be sitting there, or well, I can smell the whiskey from here. So something's leaking out already. So just go close and have a sniff, and don't dive in too much, because with this whiskey it's fine, but if you have a cask strength whiskey in your glass, then the alcohol will burn the inside of your nose. You a burning sensation, so you'll not smell anything after that. So yeah, just tread carefully and just have a sniff and let your imagination go and let your brain think, well, what's this going to taste like? Okay. And you can almost then tell if you want to add water or not as well. So if it's quite sharp, and as I say, if you feel it's quite intense,
it packs a punch, then
you're probably thinking to yourself, I'll maybe need to add some water.
That's right.
But again, once you've nosed, then just have a little sip and let the flavours just accumulate in your mouth. And sometimes it's better to nose, then sip, then go back to the nose again, because once you've tasted it, your mouth is connected to your nose, so you will pick up different things. All right. The second time. But it's personal. If you like just to pick up the glass and have a drink, well, just do that, because it's your whiskey.
All right. Let's try it, because I'm really very excited. Sláinte.
What do you think? I'll put you on the spot.
To be honest, I would lie if I would tell that this is the first time I had a Dingle. So I really like it. What I find very amazing is like it is a very full bodied. It doesn't feel watery. It has this really nice full body, very fruity. I really like that.
No, I'm glad you like it. I constructed the whiskey knowing obviously that this was going to be a permanent expression, a regular expression, and also that it was going to be available in different countries. So I tried to create a whiskey that would appeal to a wider audience. Some of our batch releases are a little bit more
on the wild side.
Not so much wild, but I wouldn't expect everybody to like every batch release that we've done, and because the world would be a dull place if they did. Yeah. But for this, again, constructed with a nice balance and a nice sweetness there, the fruitiness as you mentioned, and that's coming from a combination of two cask types that are contained within the whiskey. So this is obviously Dingle Spirit, which has then been matured fully for its full duration in a combination of Pedro Jimenez sherry casks and bourbon casks.
Okay, so it's not a bourbon aged whiskey and then finished on.
No,
it's just separately.
Which, there is quite a lot of finishing done, and some people just assume if they see sherry, they assume it's finished, or port, they assume it's finished, but no. So this is full maturation, so it's spent, 60% of it, or 61% to be
very precise,
spent its life in the Pedro Jimenez cask, and 39% in the ex-bourbon. So it's heavier on the sherry. It's got the most bourbon sherry content of any Dingle release so far.
Wow. And what I'm just as a very whiskey geeky question, if you say like this is a core expression, meaning that you got this flavor profile you're working with and you want to keep this going, but you set like, okay, we want to do 61% like sherry and like 39% bourbon, doesn't that make it a very difficult job for you to keep this consistent?
It does, and when I quote figures like 61%, it's not to say that we do still make this in batches. We don't, we haven't made up enough whiskey for the next 3 years. It's still obviously evolving and maturing in the warehouse. So this whiskey, although we say it will remain the same, it will be tweaked, it will be adjusted depending on how I feel the casks are coming through. So there may be a batch with 58%, or 57% Pedro Jimenez. It will It will vary slightly.
All right.
But again, the main aim is to try and retain that character, that flavour, because hopefully consumers will buy a bottle, finish it, and then come back and buy another bottle, and they're looking for a similar taste.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want it to be peated the next time they buy it or non-peated.
Mm-hmm. Talking about peated, I heard stories whilst walking here yesterday about you introducing a peated whiskey, like a peated expression from the distilleries you worked with previously. Is it safe to assume that in the near future a peated dingle could maybe exist?
I think it does exist, albeit in a young form at the moment. It's not quite whiskey. No. When I joined Dingle, I was fortunate to be given a very free hand to do what I wanted with the spirit and the whiskey. So we've now made peated spirit twice. So 2 years ago, and then this year we made a second batch of the peated spirit. So maybe, in, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years, you might see some of that being released as young dingle.
And we're talking like a single malt, like a peated dingle, the obvious like Irish whiskey that you probably previously couldn't try. A single pot still. Is that also something that is in the pipelines, or that's about to release, or is released in a batch form? Or
we make single pot still as well as single malt. So single pot still is made from a different set of ingredients. It's made from malted barley and unmalted barley and other unmalted grains if you want to add them, whereas single malt is 100% malted barley. So we do make the two styles. Single pot still is very traditional to Ireland and dates back many years when there was heavy taxation put on malted barley. So the Irish, as they would do, they looked for a loophole to get round it, and they obviously started adding in unmalted grain, which predominantly would have been unmalted barley. So it's quite a different style, and we've done limited edition releases where we've currently had 4 pot still releases, and will be a 5th release next year.
And how is it for you as a Scottish master distiller, taking like this very, I almost get this playground feel, like you were given a distillery and like do your thing?
Yeah.
Is it this playground? Is it this so much fun? And
it's a bit like that, because again, you're coming to a distillery that at that time was probably 6 years old. So you're coming to a distillery that's on its way, but obviously not the finished article. And the way I look at it, I'm looking to organise Dingle and the spirit and the whiskey for the next 10, 15 years. So our releases in 10 years' time, you have to think about that now. You don't turn up 10 years later and think, right, what will we do today? You have to have some form of plan, but that plan has to be flexible as well, because things will change.
Things will change, people will change, flavor like preferences from the general public can change. How do you steer this? How do you have this crystal ball in which you look and see like, okay, within 10 years, everyone loves sherry, or everyone loves, or is it, how do you make this plan based on what?
It's difficult. We are fortunate, I think, because whiskey is a very traditional drink. So I think the foundations of whiskey and the traditions will not change dramatically. Sherry matured whiskey, bourbon matured whiskey will always be the mainstay, but it doesn't stop you trying other things, other cask types, and just playing with the process as well to see. So we're fortunate in Ireland because we can play around. We have single malt, we've got pot still. Obviously Dingle up till now has been triple distilled, but the peated spirit I made was double distilled. Okay. So we've lots of permutations that we can do. We've got a little bit more of a lenient policy on which types of cask we use. Okay. So they do not always have to be made from oak. So there's lots of different things to explore, but to counter that, I need to be careful as well. I don't want to go into the warehouse and have such a mixture of casks that you cannot form anything. Yeah, okay. It's all very bitty, and you need a bit of a structure there and a bit of a backbone to work with, and then you can play around on the edges.
And would you say that the backbone of Dingle lies more on the sherry cask or more on the bourbon cask, because this is predominantly sherry?
Yes, I think so. I mean, we're not. It's difficult to know what everybody else does, but we do fill a high percentage of sherry casks. Around about 40% of what we fill is sherry, and obviously they've all been first fill casks. That's bringing in intensity and a richness to Dingle. But bourbon forms a good part as well. Port, around about 10% port casks we fill, and then others, wine, rum.
I'm very excited to take a little stroll with you to your playground, because this is something for the wider audience, and you created a batch, created a batch series.
Mm-hmm.
There is something about to happen with it. It's not being continued. There's one last bottle, and then it's this chapter ends, or
We're having one last hurrah on both sides, the single malt and the pot still.
okay.
Because we're on the single malt. I actually have the bottle here. The single malt has reached the batch number 6 now.
Okay.
So this was released just last week.
Okay.
So it's very, very fresh out of the distillery. And it's been nice, the batch series has been great for people to follow the journey of Dingle and see the whiskey develop, because the first release was back in 2016.
Okay.
So back then you're talking 3-4-year-old whiskey in there. We're now at 6-7-year-old in the batches. So people have seen it develop. They've seen all the different cask types being used, predominantly bourbon and sherry combinations. But we have introduced port previously with combined with bourbon, and we've also introduced Madeira casks in batch 5. But this one, batch 6, is the first which only contains one cask type.
Okay.
And it's been fully matured in tawny port casks. So you can maybe see the lovely deep colour that the port casks have infused. So again, that demonstrates the maturity of Dingle, where we're at now, that we are able to release a whiskey with one cask type. The reason for combining cask types previously was really to get a bit of flavour from each different cask type to help each other, almost like a blend, but not. Obviously still single malt, but you are blending different cask types to bring something to the party. Whereas this one, now, my feeling is we're now at a stage where, no, our port casks can stand on their own, our bourbon casks can stand on their own. So you'll start to see more releases from Dingle that will be one single cask type. And it becomes easier to understand as well.
Yeah.
So, but I'll let you have a hold of that, and I think we can have a little taste as well.
There are very great illustrations on the back. What is the story? Because goes this back to the icon, like the festive.
Yes, it's a long story, which I'll try and be concise. But our founder of the distillery was a gentleman called Oliver Hughes. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2016. But it was his passion for Dingle. Even long before the distillery started in 2012, he would visit Dingle on his holidays and brought family down. So Oliver had strong connections with Dingle, and when he always wanted to build a distillery. The previous business, which is still going, was a brewery and pubs in Dublin. But he had this great idea to build a distillery, and the easy option would have been to build it in Dublin, where they had their infrastructure.
Exactly.
But no, he knew it had to be, he knew Dingle had a special place. And the artwork on the back is a local artist.
Liam
O'Neill, yes. So again, we have what we call founding fathers who invested in the distillery at the beginning. They bought casks or gave money to the distillery. And Liam O'Neill is a founding father, but he's also a very
talented. Yeah, we'll try to add the picture in so that people can see it at home.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, you moved to Dingle, the town, because maybe not very clear for everyone, but Dingle is the name for the distillery, but it's named after the town it's founded in.
That's right, Dingle town. It's a small fishing town on what is called the Dingle Peninsula. So the peninsula stretches out into the Atlantic. It takes you about an hour to drive from the start of the peninsula to get to the far tip.
Okay.
So it's and there are only 2 roads in and out. So,
okay.
So once you're on the peninsula, once you're in Dingle, you're there to stay.
Okay.
For a while anyway. And it's a beautiful part of the world. You've got lovely beaches. You've got the mountains as well. And you can capture all of Ireland in that one peninsula. Beautiful place.
And do you miss Scotland, or do you say, like, no, I'm so living life to the fullest in this little peninsula, on this little peninsula?
No, I mean, obviously, it was strange times recently, and that made you think about everything. Yeah. But no, I think we're both happy. My wife obviously moved with me and works. Okay. I would say she supposedly works for me at the distillery, but I think it's the other way around. So so it was a joint decision. Obviously, you don't
do it on your own.
Go that far west, because basically, if you jump in the sea and start swimming, you'll end up in New York. So that's how far across we are.
And could you describe Dingle? Like, how is it to paint me a picture? Like, if we would visit Dingle, the distillery, in person instead of sitting here.
Okay, so Dingle has a population of around about 2,000 people.
Okay.
If you can imagine a town near you that size.
Yeah.
It's a fishing town, and it's positioned on a bay, Dingle Bay. It's a very popular tourist town, so the 2,000 population, normal natural population, probably becomes around 50,000. People do come to Dingle. It's a great weekend place to visit, but people will come for longer as well. There are around about 30 pubs in Dingle, so that describes what the social life is like. So it packs a big punch for a small village. It has so much going on for it, but it also, because it's on the edge of the peninsula, it's still retained its charm, its style. You've still got the old traditional butchers and bakers, and even a candlestick maker. We've got one of them. So yeah, it's like winding the clock back 30, 40 years.
Really interesting. I'm grabbing a glass because the batch number 6.
Yes, so this is I say it's a full maturation tawny port.
Just checking behind me to see it's 46.5.
Yes.
So that's
all
where's
the batches,
the
That's
why the
like that.
okay.
And so this will be the final one. So there will be no batch 7.
Okay.
So some people, who followed the Dingle journey, will have all the batches right through from 1 to 6. So it's a nice thing to have. But it's
nicer to have in a glass.
Even nicer to open it and drink it. So, and that's the great thing. We're starting to see more people
actually
drink Dingle, because the problem with new distilleries, at the beginning, their first release or couple of releases become very collectible, because generally they're small scale releases. So it's nice to get beyond that and just be recognised as a distillery and a whiskey that you'll open and drink rather than put in the cupboard. And
if we're looking like at these extreme bottles of whiskey that are a few thousand pounds to a bottle, is it something that you say, like, I really appreciate doing stuff like that, like making a 35 or 40 or 50-year-old Dingle? Is it something that you would consider doing?
It's nice to do. In my previous at Glenmurray, I was fortunate to be able to work with some very old whiskies, and just the history of them, because it's not, it wasn't my whiskey, it was my predecessor, Ed Dodson, the distillery manager, master distiller for Glenmurray. He laid down the spirit, or even the manager before him. So you're really, there's so much history in that bottle when you bottle out an old whiskey. But from a money point of view, I have no issue with people spending that kind of money or keeping the bottles if they want to. You do what you want in life. You spend your money on what you like, and some people buy big flash cars, and other people buy
50-year-old whiskies. Yeah.
And exactly. Okay. So who's to tell you what to do?
And back to the port cask. It smells amazing. I haven't had a sip yet.
I've jumped in, sorry.
Yeah, no. But guide me through, is because there's a lot to unpack in here. This isn't.
It's one to take time over. It's not one to drink during an interview. You kind of need to sit with it, and there's so many nuances of flavour. You've got the fruity character, the sweet wine characters coming through, and you've obviously got the traditional Dingle spirit character, which this whiskey around about 7 years old, 6 to 7 years old. So you still retain some of that lovely spirit, the freshness of the spirit, the citrusy side of things as well. But it's all about balance. You can put whiskey or spirit into casks, and the cask can overpower the spirit. Or the other way around. If the cask has been used too often, then it won't. The spirit will never get anything back from the wood. So working with good casks is great. You're giving yourself the best start, best opportunity, and then it's just a case of just trying to choose that sweet spot when to release. Because this whiskey, we're releasing this now. Come back. Obviously, still have some port casks in the warehouse. We don't use them all. So come back. It'd be nice to come back in 6 years' time and maybe release a full maturation port. And then you're comparing. There'll be 2 different whiskies.
Yes. But there are very interesting spices in the aftertaste. There's so much going on, and then I'm sitting here and I'm like, I need to do 2 things. I need to focus on what you're telling me, but this isn't an interview whiskey. It isn't at all. It is very great. Let me see. There's not all the bottles, I believe. There were measurements, and I believe on the core it is like on the side there are these purity.
It's
depths.
It's not measurements. Somebody made a joke saying, "Is that do you drink down to the line each time you go into the bottle?"
Okay, yeah,
which you can do if that's what you want to do. But no, it's to demonstrate that we have our water sources from the well, which I believe is 240 feet
It says on the bottle,
down,
so
it must be true.
it must be true. Yeah.
And I've not been down to test whether it is that deep, but it is certainly deep. And so it's all about the Dingle story. Everything's local.
Okay.
We do everything.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say we do everything as efficiently as we should or could, but we obviously make our own spirit, which in Ireland at the moment you will see distilleries releasing whiskey that they've bought in and release, which is a way of keeping their business model going. But Dingle have never gone down that route.
Okay.
We're fortunate we've very successful gin and vodka, so they were the mainstays in the early years, but we've been lucky to do that.
And you say like you try to do as much yourself, but maybe not as efficient. Is it literally like from grain to bottling to labeling? Is everything done at the facility, or how is
everything's done at the facility? And just to give an example, I don't. If people understand the whiskey making process, the first stage is mashing in the mash tun. Yeah. Now, most mash tuns have a rake inside and an arm that will clear the grain at the end, the spent grain, but ours doesn't. So our lads, as we call them, and lads in Ireland are male or female.
Yeah, okay.
You are a lad. We're all lads in Ireland. They have to jump in to the mash tun and dig out our 1 ton mash. So you can imagine this is the temperature is 60 degrees and you've got 1 ton of hot steaming grain to shovel out a hole in the side of the mash tun. That's probably the best example of what we do.
And is it because it feels the most authentic? Does it feel good to do it this way, or has it a practical reason?
I think the lads again probably would
disagree.
Be quite happy never to do it ever again, but it's more circumstance. When they built the distillery, we had no big funding behind us. Mm-hmm. Say there was the Founding Fathers program where people invested, so money was not unlimited amount of money. Yeah. And they looked at the mash tun can be a very expensive piece of equipment, even if it's small. You could be looking at 200,000-300,000 euros. Yeah, okay. But our wooden mash tun probably cost 20,000 euros. So it was more out of necessity, but it's part of the distillery now, and I won't say we'll have that mash tun forever, but
at least for a few.
There'll always be the memories of the.
It's not here to stay. It's not.
No. It'll probably get converted into a hot tub or something like that, which would be
pretty good. Is it like, have you been hands-on with like every single part yourself?
I do get involved. It's that kind of place. You have to dive in and help, but I think most people, I'm probably a hindrance when I get involved.
You also bottle on site and labels. Like, is it hand labeled?
We have we bottle. Yeah. We make the spirit, we fill it into cask. We mature at the distillery or just close by to the distillery. We then prepare the spirit for bottling and we bottle. So we have an automatic labeler as such, but the bottles are filled by hand. They're put onto the filler and taken off, and the corks are pushed in by hand. Capsule put on. So that's where I say we're not as efficient as we could be, but our ethos is that we're seen as quite an important employer in Dingle. Dingle is a very seasonal town, so for us to be operating the distillery 365 days a year, we offer employment to people that wasn't there before. So
and on. Like employment for how many people? Like how many people are involved at Dingle?
At the peak time, if you look at the wider Dingle with our sales, marketing, and people, you probably around about 30 people involved.
Oh, wow,
maybe more. When we're doing lots of tours and visitors to the distillery, you could have 30, 35 staff involved in the organisation, which is big for a. Big for a small distillery,
and also big for a very small town.
Exactly, because everything's moving on, and the traditional industries are not as strong as they were. The fishing is fading away, and so there's not much else. There's agriculture, farming, but again, that's becoming more or less labour intensive. So there's less opportunities. So it's good. It's good for the youngsters mainly. We see them come to the distillery and they don't stay. They do their 2 or 3 years and then they'll maybe move on or travel, travel the world. They quite often go to the States and work. So it's nice just to give people a step on the working ladder, and then they can go off and do their own thing as well.
And this is very complex. This is a very great whiskey to sit and enjoy. But if somebody would step up to you and say, like, I had batch 6, I liked it, it was very good, but I want something more. I want something more explosive, more.
Yeah, I know, and you'll always get that person that
where nothing is enough. It must always be more. And
an insatiable appetite for alcohol. Some people, we have a group in Ireland, and they're called the Cask Strength Crusade.
okay,
So they beat their chest and say that everything should be cask strength.
and should it?
No, not for me.
No?
It for me, cask strength whiskies will always be unique and for those that understand them, because it's not to everybody's taste. They're very, very strong, and you have to add water, and it becomes quite a tricky experience to drink the whiskey rather than just
Sitting back, enjoying and having a glass.
But there's a place for cask strength, but not for the whole world. We'd be falling about dangerously
if everyone would enjoy it.
Yeah.
But walk me through. I've seen people malting, mashing. I've seen everything. There's just one thing I never saw in person, and that is somebody actually blending different casks together to make one product. How does that work for you? Like, how is it?
Yeah, we're still quite very small scale. Our batch releases, or our even core expression Dingle single malt, we make it up in around about 20 to 30 cask batches. So there's not that many casks going in, but before that, what I'll do is sample each cask, and then you can play around in almost a laboratory scale. Mm-hmm. So you play with the quantities and adjust and see what kind of recipe you want to go for. Mm-hmm. And then you jump ahead and you do it on the large scale.
Okay.
And then reassess. So you maybe tweak it slightly. So with the single malt expression, I said 61 sherry, 39 bourbon. You may be very close to that, but you might think, that's maybe slightly lacking on the sherry, or maybe the sherry's a little too dominant. So you just add one more bourbon cask to it and play that way.
But it's like, if you're saying like I'm playing with, you are actually playing with a whole cask.
You generally are. You can work with part casks, but when you're up to that quantity, generally you can work with the whole cask. And as I said, you're not there. We're not creating blended whiskey.
No.
Blended whiskey consumers are looking for absolute same thing every time. Little variation. With single malt, you're allowed a little bit of leeway, because that's the nature of single malt. No two barrels will be the same. So you can never create the same whiskey again.
Is it so? But are these types, like if I take two casks and I fill them with exactly the same spirits and exactly the same place in the warehouse, can they change this dramatically?
It wouldn't be dramatic. It would be subtle.
Okay.
But even two bourbon casks, which bourbon casks are probably the most consistent casks to work with. They're uniform size, they're generally uniformly made, they're charred on the inside to a uniform
standard.
Right. But all these things have variables. And 6 bourbon casks filled on one day, come back 10 years later, and there'll be slight differences.
Okay.
Might be sweeter on the nose, one might be drier, one might just have a bit more vanilla. So they're all subtle. But then when you start to mix more casks together, then you're smoothing out any edges that may be there, and the whiskey becomes more uniform.
And that's basically your job. That's what you are.
That's it, really. It's to get it right at the beginning. So make the spirit and put it into the casks that I think we'll need, and then at the end select the casks to make the best whiskies we can.
Okay, I'm excited. We don't have water by hand. That's the only downside currently, but I've heard like you have been, like Dingle has been making the festival bottling for here for like whiskey and rum aan zee, and it's the first Irish festival bottling in the Netherlands ever. So that's quite exciting. It's at cask strength, so it's a hefty beast to say at least. What can we expect for like this festival bottling? How did you go on like picking a cask? How did this happen?
So this, as you say, this is I didn't know it was the first Irish whiskey festival bottling, but it's the first for Dingle to do something like this. We have released our batches, we're releasing our Dingle single malt, but this is our first venture into a very limited release. There's only 300 bottles. Oh. And not that it adds to the taste, but it's the first one that has my signature on it as well.
Okay.
So it's signed on the front. But no, apart from that, it's been a pleasure to do something like this, because it attracts a different bit of attention for the distillery and creates interest in a different way. So to create the whiskey, or to select the whiskey that's inside the bottle, I made a decision that it would be nice to let people taste the single malt release in its natural form, cask strength. Okay. So this is what you have in here. So this is again the combination of Pedro Jimenez bourbon casks, but at a cask strength of 60.8%. 6%.
Okay, so it's something to prepare for?
Again, this is one, I said you drink your whiskey how you like, but this is probably one I would try and advise people
Add
how
some
to
water.
drink it. Definitely add some water. It's 60.6. It's hefty, and whiskies at that strength can remain a little bit closed, a little bit tight because there is just so much alcohol effect in there. So if you can, water will open it up, and you can hit your own sweet spot as to when you like to drink it. You'll never add so much water to bring it down to the 46.3. You just never would. You're starting at a high level, but you may, you'll certainly take it down a few percentage points, and the water, as I say, opens up the whiskey. But have a look at that.
So it's 300 bottles precise?
Exactly 300, yes. Numbered as well.
Oh, and it's all done by hand?
All done by hand, and the only bit I did by hand was signing the labels.
And you did sign every 300
I
labels?
signed 300. Hard work. But again, my wife, she wrote the bottle numbers and the strength on, so she had a bigger job and labelled it and did everything.
I will put it next to the collection of what we tried today. Now I'm gonna dive in.
Yeah.
It has exactly the same, like the like the fruity notes I'm getting from the single malt. I'm getting that as well, but this is so much more aggressive.
So much more intense, It's almost, if you just think of it in concentration terms, you're almost half as
More.
strong again, So I think for me the sherry influence is probably even more dominant than previously. It really comes through, and obviously the colour as well is so rich.
It's basically everything at Dingle is non-chill filtered, natural color.
Yes, non-chill filtered natural colour, and obviously this is now cask strength. So everything you see in the glass is coming from the distillery or the cask.
Oh wow!
So
okay.
that's it's distillery spirit made, obviously, and then it's down to the casks after that. And the climate in Dingle is very mild.
Okay.
And the whiskey matures well because of that. Coming from Scotland, you go into the warehouse in the winter, it could be sub-zero for a few weeks.
Okay.
And the whiskey just does not interact with the wood at that temperature. So in Dingle, it doesn't drop below 5 degrees in the winter.
Oh wow! Okay. It is more consistent.
I would say so. It's certainly maturing at a faster rate than in Scotland. So that's one up for Irish whiskey.
Okay. Nah.
It all helps us though, because again, releasing whiskies at younger age, you want to give it the best shot, and it's the first fill casks, the consistent maturation. It all comes together, hopefully, in the taste.
I will try it.
Yes, but tread carefully.
The taste is, I was like, okay, this is very surprisingly mild. And then the aftertaste,
After's a killer.
everything is okay.
Because I kept that in my mouth quite a while,
Yeah.
and it was very sweet and
Yes.
very tasty at the front end.
And then the
once you
finish.
swallow, it's like, whoa, wow. Then it goes up through you.
It's not, no, I shouldn't, you should not drink this at 12 o'clock in the afternoon.
Well, it'll be a short day for you if you do.
Do all this,
You may be in your bed for tea time at this rate, but...
How is the best way to experience Dingle? Is it actually visiting the distillery, or is it taking a bottle home and just sitting comfy at home? Will it also transport you a bit?
I think if you can at least visit Dingle once in your life,
Yeah.
because then that is in your head, the memory is there, and drinking whiskey is all about memories and who you drank it with, or where, and what time. So if you can get to Dingle and experience just the town, the peninsula, visit the distillery itself as well, then you can sit at home.
And then it's...
And just remember getting
there
soaked in the rain in Dingle.
Is there a story, like, if you sit here, like in the Netherlands, it's not the same as in Ireland, but if you sit here with a glass of Dingle, like, what is the first memory that springs to mind of you and Dingle?
It's a good question. I think it's probably going to one of the local pubs, sitting in there and chatting to the locals, because they're so friendly, and they'll generally give you lots of stories. They're great storytellers.
Okay.
So you don't need to speak.
You can just...
You just have to listen, and you'll get their whole life story in a pint, almost. So yeah, I think it's that. It's just that close community where everybody's friendly and everybody's welcoming, and they'll help you out no matter what you need.
And you, like, now you've been living there for 2 years, 2+ years?
2 years, yeah.
2 years, and you feel like, okay, you are so welcome that it's home.
It is home, yeah. I look at myself as a whiskey, so I was matured in Scotland for 25 years and I finished in Ireland. So Finished in Ireland for 2 years plus, hopefully a bit longer. So
I'm really...
the best of both worlds, I think.
I think that is a very great way to end this conversation. Graham, thank you so much for having a chat. Hopefully everyone who's watching or listening this, they can visit you at the distillery, see you sign another 300 plus labels for a new, hopefully a new bottling.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. Open invitation there to anybody to come and see us and share Dingle whiskey in
person.
Dingle. And hopefully some of you will follow the Dingle journey, because we're only on the first ladder, or the rung of the ladder. We've got
a long
few
way
steps to go yet, so it's going to be an interesting journey.
Is there something that you could tease, like something that, if you say like keep your eyes open for?
Oh, gee, keep your eyes open for. I think it's going to. It'll be Dingle with a bit of smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm looking
forward.
forward.
A smoking mirror.
All right. I'm looking forward to it. It's 3 to 5 years. So you say I'm able to wait for that. But
excellent.
Graham, thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to sit back and enjoy the glasses that I'm still having. And I wish you a great stay in the Netherlands.
Thank you. Thank you. Slanje.
Slanje. And we're back in the studio again with Lucia.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How
Did
are
you enjoy the talk with Graham?
Very much.
And you are still enjoying your glass of Dingle?
Oh my God. Such a drop.
Yes. We enjoyed the talk with Graham a lot. And thank you so much for listening to this special episode, our fully English episode about Dingle. Ladies and gentlemen, please, if you like this episode, share it with a friend, put it on Facebook, Instagram, or just send a pigeon to someone.
Smoke signal.
Also
Yeah.
very good idea. If you like this content, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Elements of Whisky. Here we post like reviews and also teasers for new episodes. So when there's
Pretty
a next
pictures of
or pretty
bottles.
pictures. So if you really like this content, give us a follow, right?
What?
Yeah, can be so easy. Can be so damn easy. And we will be back next week in Dutch with our regular scheduled episode. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching or listening.
And or listening.
And we'll be back in the future with some more content for you guys, completely in English. If you like this and would like to see more on a regular basis, just send us a message. And perhaps we can do some more for you guys.
Hopefully.
Thank you so much to Graham for having this talk. Thank you so much to Whisky and Rum at Sea for having us there to host the whole conversation. And thank you, Lucia, for sitting here and enjoying this Dingle.
Thank you, man.
All right. Thank you so much. Until next time.